Welcome everyone. With me is John's Comics with Kids, my first official guest, sort of, for the podcast for Comic Collectors Corner. Other episodes that you guys have watched, if you've subbed me up and followed me there, have just been old episodes of interviews with the community. So John, here's my first official interview with the podcast in mind. So welcome, John. Thank you for coming.
Wow, thanks. I didn't realize I was going to be setting this up here. It's good that you're starting here. You got nowhere to go but up, right?
Yes. I kept that in mind. I said, who could screw this up the least? Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about what got you into collecting, how old you were, how your collecting formed, since the whole idea of the podcast is to basically for collectors by collectors, So what is your 411?
Well, I started collecting because I would go on these trips to my grandmother's in Arizona, and they had a Circle K or 7-Eleven kind of place right around the corner, and it was walking distance. And we would get pocket money from my mom. I would ask almost every day for some because you could go down to there, and they had a spinner rack of comics. And I would just buy everything that I could, which is why there are certain months in the summer, every year when I was a kid, that I read a ton of the Marvel books that were released that summer. Nice. So we're talking, Claremont in the early 200s of Xmen was right up that alley. Anything that Secret Wars that was happening in that mid 80s range was just my jam. I was really just grabbing those books, reading them until they were completely destroyed. And then the next summer I'd be getting some more. And then after that it was, hey, there's these comic shops you can actually go, and that's all they have. I got to go check this out. And then it just expanded, and then it waxes and wanes. I went to college and didn't have as much time or money, and then got out and started working, and then I had my own money. So then I started collecting again. Then you have kids and you take a break again. And, I've waxed and waned, but I always come back to my favorites.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how sporadic my thing is. I mean, I remember the Sunday newspaper. That was my first probably thing, Archie Digest and things like that.
Or even the Spider-Man comics, right? They would have a strip.
Well, I never had Spider-Man when I was. I might have gotten into comics if I actually done that, but the Denver Post, which was the Sunday paper I got, did not have that.
Oh wow.
So I might have
I think it was the LA Times that my dad was getting when I was a little kid, and it always had a Spider-Man, and there was just 3 panels, but you had to know what happened last time to know this one, and you just had to keep up with it.
Yeah, so I might have gotten into comics sooner had I actually, been a part of that, but my whole thing with comic books was the Sunday papers, Digest, and maybe sporadic things. I remember the 90s Spider-Man show, Batman the Animated Series,
of course,
Gargoyles. I remember things like that. And then the next stage I remember is I remember trades in high school. I think I actually read the first or second volume of the Ultimate Spider-Man in there. Nice. I remember reading Venom, or the first thing about Venom for the ASM 300, that kind of story. I knew that. I knew sporadic, but there just wasn't. I was missing a spark, and I mentioned this when talking to Reggie. If you guys were, if I remember I was missing. I had A and D, but I was A and D, but I was missing B and C for the spark into comic books, and it wasn't until other passions helped fill in the gaps that led to comic books. Anyway, so that's my brief story. I'm not here to judge. So anyway, so you are primarily, I know you, when I think about comic collectors, I think of, Reggie as Spider-Man, Comic Fu as Green Lantern, there's a guy on Instagram who's a Batman Beyond collector.
Sure. When
I think of you, it's X-Men, pure X-Men. So tell us a little bit about your love of X-Men and how you got started with X-Men. You mentioned Claremont earlier, so let's dive more into that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably one of the early issues that I pulled off of that spinner rack was something from Claremont's mid 200s kind of range, or early 200s, I should say. So this is issue 211 with the anniversary X-Men Marvel border going around the outside edge, and Wolverine in the middle popping the claws, part of his mask shredded away. And this was from 1986 November, and these issues I remember distinctly. I had the G.I. Joe one with the anniversary border around. I had the Spider-Man black suit face bordered one. I think it was like 248 or something like that. 58? No, 258.
ASM.
It was the ASM. It was the black Spidey face, and it was the anniversary border.
I think it was 282, if I remember correctly.
282. So I mean, that was like definitely stuff that I picked up early, and I thought, you know what? Part of it was the issues that I happened to pick up were just super violent, and I probably just part of me was just like, wow, this Wolverine guy, he's legit. Like, he doesn't hold anything back, and I think that hooked me a little bit. And then anything I saw with Wolverine on the cover, I went after, and then I started finding other characters I was interested in because of that. I also snagged, at that same time, early mid 80s, 85, I think Marvel was reprinting certain things. So they reprinted a Hulk 180, Hulk 181 comic that was together in one book, and it had a wraparound cover where they put Wendigo on the back cover so they could put Wolverine and Hulk alone on the front. And it was called The Incredible Hulk and Wolverine number 1, but there was never a number 2, and it was just 180 and 181, all the sequences with Wolverine primarily, but it was the whole story put together with a little like bio of Wolverine at the back. And I remember reading that and just absolutely going, this is crazy, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
And I just got into that whole Claremont universe.
Yeah, I mean, the X-Men in general are an interesting subject. I mean, it was a Stan Lee kind of documentary kind of thing. X-Men were kind of reflective of the civil rights. You got this outcast group, fighting for equality in a world that seems to hate it. I mean, it's kind of hard with us being the white males that we are to understand totally what that must be like, but we can understand somewhat by reading our comic book characters like the X-Men.
So the history of the X-Men is a very interesting one, like you're saying, and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, obviously the king creators over there at Marvel, had so many great ideas, and one of them was the X-Men. And you mentioned Archie earlier, and I'd say Archie was a bigger influence on Stan than maybe the civil rights movement at the beginning. And he wanted this Archie and the gang kind of group that were dealing with hormones changing, their bodies changing, they didn't know what was going on. And let's throw superpowers in as one of those changes and really just see what happens to these characters. And there was instead of Archie and 2 girls vying for him, it was one girl, Jean, and a couple of the guys vying for her. And they were teen hijinks and silly jokes and a lot of that sort of Archie-esque humor. And then as the book went on, Stan Lee said later, he sort of understood it as an allegory for civil rights. But at the beginning, it was not a plan, that it wasn't anything that he and Jack had planned. In fact, it was either so subconscious that he didn't realize it, or it was just something that other writers decided to push to the forefront. And of course, Claremont being one of them that really made that the focus. And even more so to the extent that he brought in this sort of idea of the burgeoning homosexual movement at the era when he took over, late 60s, early 70s. There were a lot of people that felt like the X-Men were now an allegory for them as well. And they would write in letters, and Marvel would refuse to publish them. Marvel editorial felt like it was inappropriate, that they didn't want anybody openly homosexual to have their letter published. And so Chris could reply to them on his own, but they wouldn't publish any of it for quite a while, until finally he was able to convince them late in the run that they would publish them and that he could reply, because he had fans all the time that would come up to him and say, I felt like Kitty Pryde. I felt like, whatever, that my coming out and her coming out as a mutant were related. They felt like there was this connectivity.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at this team, for those of you who on our podcast, I'm holding a facsimile of X-Men #1 here. That it's just, I don't understand somewhat in those, like, the uniforms, how the team could have caught on. I mean, seriously, this is like a candidate for most embarrassing mom, why'd you dress me like this?
Right.
Cover.
And it took almost 3 years before they even redesigned those costumes. They stuck with them for quite a while.
But yeah, just seriously, I mean, Iceman being an Omega level mutant, we looked more like a Olaf.
Yeah, he's like a snowball.
So seriously, I mean, the movies X-Men, Iceman was much more cool, and I can see why that character was understandable and all that. But looking at him based on the comic books, you wonder how the character, caught on.
And the books, I mean, they were not like unpopular, but they really were never as big, and especially the early 60 books or so that they did were never as popular as the Avengers or the Fantastic Four or Spider-Man or any of those. They were definitely the sort of ugly stepchild of the group. So much so that they stopped around issue, I want to say 67, and stopped making new issues and just did reprinted issues for about 20 or so issues. So the late 60s, all the 70 issues, all the issues in the 80s, all the way up to 93, all those were just reprinted previous issues with new covers because they were spinning their wheels and the book wasn't selling and they didn't know what to do. And finally, Len Wein, I'm not sure how to say his name, he came on board with some ideas. He had already invented this character Wolverine in the Incredible Hulk, and he's like, I really want to do something. And he did the book you're holding up right there, the giant size X-Men, which a lot of people credit to Claremont, but he is not listed in any way in that book's credits.
Yeah, this is probably the only giant size X-Men I'll have.
Well, I just got mine back from CGC, and it's sitting next to me again, my baby.
I'm fomenting a plan of sneaking into John's house and trading the facsimile for his. I don't think he'll notice the $4.99 or the fact that it's ungraded.
The raw swat. It's like Indiana Jones trading the idol for the bag of sand.
Yeah, except the big boulder is going to be John coming after me, going, "Give me my baby back!"
Just chasing. Yeah. So Len created this team. Len created this idea, and I'm sure Claremont was talking to him. In interviews I've read, it sounds like Chris was aware of what was going on and was kind of vying for this new job. The writer of Uncanny X, or at the time it was still just called X-Men. He was vying for that job. So he was clearly aware of like, okay, and now we're going with a very new team. Instead of that whole real white bread 5 characters you were holding up earlier, now we have characters from all different countries, right? Canada, Africa, Germany, Russia, Ireland, Scotland. Ireland. Yeah, Ireland. A Native American. So we had this, somebody from Japan. We had this whole ethnic universe that they were pushing. And he was really on board with that concept. Some of the characters left very early, did not stay for very long. Sunspot and John Proudstar really didn't last very long.
Was it Warbird that died 2 issues later in X-Men 95?
Very early, they killed some off, and others just flat out left the team. But the core group, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Storm, these were characters that really were defining the new book. And of course, Wolverine, as John Byrne later came on board and became obsessed with Wolverine, he became a focal point as well.
Yeah. What made the X-Men? I mean, X-Men have always been. I gotta admit, X-Men have been on a bug recently for me. I've gotten more interested in getting certain X-Men books, not the whole. I don't mean I'm not going to chase down another complete run X-Men, but I do want to collect, at least try and collect keys and things like that. But what first interested me in X-Men or got me to care about the X-Men was the X-Men Evolution TV show. Not the 90s one with the whole night. No,
not the later one.
I mean, I started watching that one just a little bit to see what it's about, but it was X-Men Evolution that got my attention. With Spike and Kitty and Wolverine. From that regard, just maybe it's just the music with that got me versus others at the time. I don't know, because I think that's the 2000s X-Men or something like that.
Yeah,
the 90s. So I don't know. Maybe that's just right there where I would be, and I would have been, if I got into comics, I think would have been in the 2000s-ish stuff. I would have been right there at the beginning of Ultimate Spider-Man, things like that. I would have missed the 90s Clone Saga. I would have missed that kind of stuff. The 90s.
Well, I think with any book, and I'm sure you can attest to this with Spider-Man as well, you have these eras, right? And obviously the beginning for Spider-Man, for X-Men, the beginning was the Lee Kirby era. But there was plenty after that. Roy Thomas did a really great run. I got a few of his issues here as well. This is issue 28, the first Banshee.
Nice.
And Roy Thomas did a really, really great run on the book, and I genuinely really like his stuff better than the Lee Kirby stuff, although the Kirby artwork is hard to deny. So I can appreciate what those other artists came along and did. Even Neil Adams had a short run on X-Men that I think is often overlooked. When you're looking at Neil Adams stuff, everybody thinks Batman, but I like his stuff that he did on X-Men as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the big second era. If the first era was the Stan Lee era, the second was Claremont, right? And that was an incredibly long era that stretched from Dave Cockrum and John Byrne on art at the beginning all the way to Jim Lee at the end.
Yeah.
And a lot of other artists, you mentioned John Romita Jr., but a lot of other artists in the middle took over and gave their time on the run. And it's just, I think it's just an iconic run, because a lot of times, as you know, writers don't last. They don't. It's very rare to have like somebody like Brian Michael Bendis do an Ultimate Spider-Man run that really stood the test of time and lasted for a considerable amount of issues. And I think Claremont's run is one of those.
Yeah, I mean, the eras and writers, I mean, I think you're influenced by when you come in. I think during one of my deep pondering, things about my collection here, like, why do I like Nick Spencer so much? I know I'm going to seriously sit down and discuss and then think about it, going, And I came across an idea that it flashed across my mind that said, I couldn't shake it. I'm going, that has to be it. I love Nick Spencer so much because that's when I came into Spider-Man. That's when I collected it with a passion. So I think that's why I like Nick Spencer as a writer so much, is because that's the spark that lit into a fire. And so people can talk trash about Nick Spencer all they want, and I'm going to be defending him. And I think that's where I came in. So I think that's probably the reason why. Anyway,
well, there's always that nostalgia element, right, to when you first were exposed to something, and that first, they say there's never a chance at a second chance at a first impression, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. That first impression becomes the touchstone, right? And then when somebody brings you that same recipe again later, but they've changed it, you might not appreciate it as much because you're still expecting a certain flavor, a certain taste, and it's not there anymore. Which is why I have a bunch of friends that don't like the current X-Men run, because what Jonathan Hickman is doing right now is so tonally different from any of the runs preceding it that I think, I've talked to my buddy Jay Hood Creative a bunch about this. It's just very off-putting and not, and for them, very hard to connect and relate to.
Yeah. Well, for those fans out there, you guys might want to plug your ears for this, because I'm going to do a theory that you guys are not going to like. That is where the X-Men have been. When the X-Men are fully introduced into the MCU, I'm going to say they have been on Krakoa. They have been on their own kind of island this whole time, and they're just now branching out and things like that. Hidden Among Us kind of thing, like Wakanda in a way, but they've been protective of themselves because they've been in the past hated and prejudiced against, that they almost withdrew to safety, and we just haven't seen them, and the world kind of forgot about them. So that's my theory about that.
So is this going to boost the first appearance of Krakoa?
Yes, I have that. I have
this
that
book.
Yeah,
it's the giant size X-Men. Sorry, people.
Yeah, so that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it till I see otherwise.
Yeah,
but
no, I love that concept, and I know that I've seen other people talking about how, well, where have they been all this time, and that explains it very nicely, I think.
Yeah. All right. So back to you. What is some of the best books that you have found in the wild in comic book stores? Not off of eBay or made on trades, that you actually found. Like, one of the best books that I have might not be worth particularly much, but it's like the oldest X-Men book that I've actually found in the wild. I have X-Men number 20 here that I got for like $20. It's about 3.5-ish. It's third appearance of the Blob, origin of how Professor X lost use of his leg. But this is literally X-Men, 20 issues of X-Men here.
Love it. And that old X-Men logo with the like X with the like points on the end of the X.
Yeah.
I love it.
Looked like a treasure map, X marks its spot.
Right? It looks like it's been torn paper or something, right?
Yes. So
I only have 2 X-Men that are about that early era. One One of them I've used for different part icons for my channel at different points long ago, and that's X-Men 35, which you would appreciate as the first issue where Spider-Man appeared in the X-Men.
Yeah, that's on my want list. I have to have that because it is Spider-Man on the cover.
Right? It's a Spider-Man and his butt is right there. You don't see his head, but he's right there. I also have the issue where he first appeared in the Avengers, which I really like as well. Yeah. But his costume very different in that cover. A very, very unusual looking Spider-Man costume in that.
But that's America's other ass.
Right, exactly. So that's issue 35, and I got that at my LCS. Every once in a while, my LCS will buy a collection, and they're very good about posting on their Instagram. So I'm always kind of watching for, when they post a video, flipping through individual issues, and if they get early X-Men stuff, they're usually good about letting me know. But the earliest issue I have of X-Men is issue 14, and this is the first appearance of the Sentinels, my favorite X-villain. I mean, I do love Magneto and a lot of the other villains, but something about murderous purple and pink robots just clicks with me. I don't know what it is. So I love this cover with the outstretched hands towards us and the team sort of scrambling behind them. So this is issue 14. It's not in perfect shape. I paid like $60 for it. It's got a lovely crease right down the middle, but some kid had folded it and put it in their back pocket.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those.
But those are the earliest issues that I found at my shop, and but I was super glad to snatch those up.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite storylines and all that you can recall, you think off the top of your head? Because I mean, I haven't seen or I haven't read any of the Age of Apocalypse. I thought the movie was cool. I mean, I know some people are like the same thing with Star Wars. They hate the new stuff, love the old stuff, or kind of a thing. I mean, I'm either I'm of the opinion or I have the ability to basically almost divorce things from each other and can focus just on its one piece at one time. But out of the new movies, I mean, I like Days of Future Past a lot. That was like I love this. More, please. Age of Apocalypse wasn't bad. I like the whole, like you said, mentioned beginning, power, fighting, and brutal, and power. There's something about seeing these beings with godlike powers fighting each other, and one of them is in the middle of basically reshaping the world, causing so much damage because he is serving his boss at the time because humanity done me wrong. He killed my wife and girl. So
I think as far as the movies go, that Days of Future Past film I thought did a really good job with that. I know that people want sometimes a very faithful movie adaptation that follows the story beats perfectly. I don't necessarily think that was needed, and I think they did a really clever job of melding the original films and the newer films and crafting something that felt organic to those universes and yet also thematically true to what Claremont had done with Days of Future Past. So
faithful melding of the two. You mentioned, and we're back. We're mentioning faithful melding between the X-Men Days of Future Past movie and the old cast, new cast, and all that.
I just think it was a lot to juggle. I mean, the expectations of fans, versus what was in the comics originally versus those two movie sort of trilogies, which were on their own paths. I think it was a lot to juggle. I think they did a really good job. So that I thought they did a very faithful adaptation.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't know very much about X-Men storylines, but like I said, Days of Future Past, I like it because of the movie. I did look forward to finding down the 2 issues of that storyline. That's 2 of the books that I want in my collection here. I know a little about the Phoenix Saga, Dark Phoenix Saga.
I would say in general, if all you've seen are those movies, the books are going to be radically different, and that's kind of fun because you'll go into it expecting one thing, but getting something different, and so in that way it'll be very, very surprising.
Yeah. Well, to explain a little bit more about me for those of us in the podcast, I love Harry Potter. It was my all-time favorite book as a kid, and I was such a hungry for Harry Potter person. I was on fan fiction sites reading fan fiction material. So I have in my head 200 different Harry Potter stories, each one that I loved. And so I can see, I can take bits and pieces of Harry Potter and meld them together if I wanted to, or kind of thing. So that's when you love 200 different stories, you're not married to one in all that regard. I mean, yes, J.K. Rowling, she'll always be my solid line and all that. I love Harry Potter for her, but and that way, so when I see okay, that movie's not like the book, I don't see it as a how dare they ruin my X-Men, how dare they ruin my Spider-Man, this is an absolute disgrace. I'm not like that. I'm like, well, that's a good story that's a good take on a story I like. That's a good alternate Earth for the multiverse people out there. That's an X-Men from Earth too. So that's why I'm not quite as up in arms as everyone else. I mean, I might go, I don't like that rendition of it, but it's like going, in the end. I just have to go through my emotions, and then I fall back in love with the characters in itself and say, okay, well, they can't touch the history of it. They made a bad movie. So what? So, but that's me being mature about it. What can I say?
No, I think that's a very logical way. I wish more people were more level-headed about it like that.
Well, what can I say? I've had a lot of time by myself justifying why I'm by myself. Anyway,
so for me, like I came into the X-Men in the early like 200 number. So those are issues that like are touchstones for me.
Yeah.
So issue 200 is a pivotal issue for a lot of fans, because it's the issue when they finally started making Magneto a good guy, or at least a bad guy that we could fully rationalize. Mm-hmm. It's called the Trial of Magneto, because Magneto is put on for trial for his war crimes in the past, and spoiler, he's exonerated and goes on to be something of a mentor teacher at the Xavier Institute and start to help teach a new generation of mutants. So this is the redemption arc for Magneto, and it's something that I always really enjoyed in the book. And it's immediately followed by issue 201, another key book, because this is the moment when Storm becomes the leader of the team, when Cyclops is revealed to have a son who later is Cable in the X-Men and X-Force and New Mutants. So 200 and 201, I feel like, are an interesting jumping on point for fans looking to start off into these books. Yeah. You really get an insight into the dynamics of the team, the characters. I think the events are hugely important and impactful. And that's kind of like a moment when I really started to get into these worlds.
Yeah, and that's a perfect thing to segment into this little brief. I was doing my own research, about X-Men stuff to try and be able to keep up with John and act like I know what I'm talking about, since I only know so much about X-Men and all that. So one article I found was basically like points to start reading. So for those of you guys out there who are new to X-Men or wondering where to start, it listed about 8 different things on where to start. Starting from number 8, going on up, 1991 X-Men relaunch, the Age of Apocalypse storyline, Days of Future Past, which is a very compact 2-issue storyline, so very easy to read from what I know of. So, and House of M, the original Rhyme Animals, I think, I'm not sure, the new X-Men, the all different X-Men, which is the giant-size X-Men sitting behind John there, and then the number one on the list it mentioned was the House of X Powers of 10.
Wow.
Basically, I'm betting because it's just the most modern.
I was going to say, it must be.
But I actually loved this. Like I said, I mentioned earlier before, I loved the whole idea. I love the whole idea of them having their own country, their own, I mean, not to say that, separate but equal kind of mentality. I like that whole, they deserve a country. They deserve someplace to have more safe. I like the whole idea of them. Well, we have enough people in the world to be our own country. Where, why don't they? And
that's true to what Claremont started to realize when he brought the Days of Future Past storyline to play. Mm-hmm. He realized that you can't have an antagonist trying to stop your population if the population isn't significant. And so he started expanding the X universe pretty exponentially at that point and trying to have a lot of new characters, a lot of new villains, a lot of new mutants. mutants. And then by the time Hickman came along, there were so many that now you could actually create a nation, and it would work to the extent that they have power for the first time, because before then they were always being hunted, right? They were always being prejudiced against, and to have them have a position of power where they can then exert some of that influence, that's a whole new dynamic.
Yeah, I forget which one it's a part of. I think it was because I have CGC graded House of X and House 1 and House of X 3, or is it 4? It's when they go into space and take out that station to stop things from happening. But one of these, I think it might just be the X-Men run after the House of Powers of, where Charles is sitting down with Magneto and whatever. They're sitting down with a like a UN small council kind of a thing, basically discussing, and these guys are basically were planning an attack to basically wipe out Krakoan leadership, from what I remember. And then Magneto, because they're talking psychically to their group that they brought that's taking out the guys that are going to take out them. And Mita's going, by the way, the steak's good. We took out your guys. I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. I love that.
It's a very Godfather-like moment. And I remember reading that issue and feeling like this was highlighting the fact that these are not the same push 'em around mutants that we've seen in earlier runs, where they've been really like fumbling through the Marvel universe, right? Now we have them in a position where they're realizing we're stronger together. Good guys, bad guys, we're stronger together. And that seeing Magneto not being the one having to exert the force, right? Cyclops is running the op downstairs, blasting all these guys. Jean is keeping them linked psychically. And Magneto gets to eat his steak and watch them deal with it.
Yeah. Speaking of Magneto, a personal thing here. Do you like him in his red and purple outfit, or do you like him in his white? I personally favor the white, because there's something about potentially bad guys or badass guys wearing white that the white to me says so much more badass and deadlier. A bad guy in black is
boring.
It's boring. It's been said. It's cliche. It's been there. But to have him in white, that's white almost signifies power and divine. And this guy is just so badass. Just got him in white was just like, when I saw him in white for the first time, I'm like, I didn't know I needed this. I must have it. Thank you.
So good. So if the more I read early X-Men and the more I read Claremont's run, the more I realize that they used the color purple and the color pink like really interestingly. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the villains have elements of that. Even Apocalypse sometimes is blue, sometimes is like a violet purple color. The Sentinels. So that I really do appreciate the pink and purple villains that they have in the past. And so that Magneto purple costume, I'm down. I'm all for it. But that white one is quite ominous and shows blood really nicely.
Yeah, just them like that. It makes sense to put Magneto in a thing like purple, because the reason why, Roman emperors and things like that, they wore purple because it was a color of royalty, kind of thing. It was a color reserved for them. So it made sense that Magneto would be so full of himself that I'm wearing purple because I am that important.
Well, and doesn't he even, I want to say he even says in House Issue 1 something like this, we're the gods now.
Yes, frankly, if I had power,
that's how big he thinks of himself, And Storm too. Storm is a goddess and ruler of not only like a planet now, but like part of the universe. I have a few X-Men books, like the giant size, planet size. I had those, the kind of thing. I bought House of X, Powers of X when it came out, and I bought a few, I think 20 issues afterwards, and a few issues of the new X-Force, but I didn't get all of them. And I've stopped getting them, not because I don't like the characters or like the books, but it was just, for those of you, like you said, who care about Spider-Man back in the past or whatever, you had 4 titles, Web of, Spectacular, things like that. You're getting a book every week, but now try an X-Men where you get 10 books a week. It's a ton.
I cannot do that. I cannot cover all the X-Men books to stay relevant in the story when they all intertwine like alphabet soup.
And that's been the biggest hurdle, I think, of the most recent era of X-Men, the Hickman era, because he is somebody that rewards that level of commitment. But at the same time, how many of us have the wallet to really accomplish that? However, somebody that reads it in collected volumes, the Dawn of X Volume 1, the Dawn of X, can really appreciate and enjoy how everything is interwoven and all the connectivity, or reads it digitally through the Marvel Universe app where it's all organized for you the way they want you to read it. So I appreciate that level of detail and that level of appreciation for the fan. But it's hard on the wallet when these books cost $4 to $7, you know?
Yeah, definitely. An X-Men fan like that, you guys would be better off Marvel Unlimited and reading just a couple months later.
No, I'm super jealous right now of any person who starts the Marvel Unlimited app now and tries to start reading Hickman's era, because you have so much great reading and it's all organized, it's all right ahead of you, and you can just at your leisure just basically clear through it.
Yeah. I don't know if I started right at House of X #1, but I think I just couldn't help but be pulled in by that cover that I just peeked to the inside and went, huh. And then I fell in love with it, the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, the 2 recent books that I got of X-Men right now was Hellfire Gala. I got on mycomicshop.com, as well as the Immortal X-Men #4. It's my second issue that I've gotten of the Immortal X-Men. I think I got the issue 1 just because I like that term, Immortal X-Men. Now, but I got them, and plus, Emma Frost in the Marilyn Monroe.
Laying in the bed sheets,
red sheets, and all that, and she's like going like, "Here's my money."
Yeah, take it. Yeah, I think part of this era too, it's been dominated by obviously Jonathan Hickman, but also Kieran Gillen seems to be the guy that's kind of running a lot of it now. He's writing Immortal X-Men. He is writing the current Judgment Day event. And he's both of them share this love for very big epic storytelling and hugely connected things with all the minutia that work together. And so I think they speak the same language, but it can be daunting for a fan.
Yeah, this most recent event with the Eternals and X-Men and Avengers, I might read it in trade or something like that, but I'm not going to buy every single issue when I'm Spider-Man here. My commitments are to Spider-Man first and foremost, being the complete collection I have of ASM. So but it's but
you mentioned the event idea and the interconnectivity, and I wanted to mention the event that got me hooked on X-Men. Like I said, I started around the early 200s of the Claremont run, Uncanny. And they had this event, which I'm not certain is the first of its kind, but certainly was one of the early interconnected events in comics. And the concept was that there were mutants living under the city of New York. These were the outcast mutants. They were deformed, or they had no control of their powers, or their powers weren't particularly impressive or useful. And so they were kind of living sort of like homeless people beneath the city. And in the story, a group of mercenaries called the Marauders are hired to slaughter them. And later we learned that Gambit was involved and all these other characters. But like at the time, we just knew this like group of assassins walking beneath the city of New York, killing. And people like Sabretooth were among these assassins. And the event connected through a lot of different books. So Daredevil has a crossover. Thor has a crossover. Besides the main X titles like X-Men and X-Factor and New Mutants and Power Pack. But a lot of interconnectivity with characters dealing with an assault simply for like being alive. And it's a really great event. I have several of the issues. I held up to 11. But it's one of those storylines that I feel like it's partly like traumatizing because it's graphic, right? These characters are fighting really violent. Like Sabretooth gets there's like a 3-issue fight with Wolverine, and there's all these really bloody covers.
That was one of my first X-Men books there, that Wolverine one. I got in the
This is 212. And he also fights, Sabretooth fights Daredevil. And this is the story arc where Angel loses his wings. He gets pinned to a wall, and the Marauders basically destroy his wings. Thor has to rescue him, and then later he gets his wings back that are metal, but like he loses them completely in this. He has to have a surgery after. So big things happened, like life-changing things for several characters occur in this event. And I found it a very, very impactful read. And the more I've gone back and read the more I feel like I've read of these issues, the more I felt like it was really well handled.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's my copy.
There it is.
Yeah, I have a few books there. Like one of the more recent books I picked up for $15. First appearance of Jubilee.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And then when I saw, and that's basically what made me want to watch more of the X-Men, the 90s show, was I'm like, let me just see what the first episode's about and all that. And then I saw Jubilee basically in her first real thing. I see her and I'm going like, okay. And I just remind me, hey, I just bought that recently, a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago. I'll give it a chance. They
really made her the focal point, kind of like Kitty Pryde was a focal point at the beginning of Claremont's run. This young new kid, becoming a part of the team, learning what her powers are, meeting all these mutants. That was very much what Kitty Pryde did for those books.
Yeah, that X-Men 168 is, Kitty on the cover predominantly. There, that's one of the books I want, is that Kitty Pryde covers, because that's even before I was truly into X-Men or truly thought about collecting certain keys of X-Men, I see that cover and go, I could buy that very easily. I could buy that cover. Something about that, just the clarity, something about that, just the look on her face,
right?
Just is like, Anyway, but yeah.
So I was going to mention, after the Claremont run, between Claremont and Hickman, a lot of times people missed out on that stuff and didn't read a lot of that stuff. And there were a ton of rotating artists and writers that came on during that time. And it's kind of what I just lump it all together and call it like modern era X-Men, because it was a lot of reboots and restarts. You mentioned Ultimate X-Men, and a lot of different people came on to do their stories. I really do think Jason Aaron's really short run is worth a shot. It's called Wolverine and the X-Men, and it's all about Wolverine having to take a shot at leading the team, which is not in his character. And Jason Aaron is so talented. He really did a great job. I think it's just 2 trades. I know that other people love the more dark and violent Rick Remender run called Uncanny X-Force, I think is what they called it. And it had a team with some of the more violent X-Men all together. You got Deadpool, you got Wolverine, you got Archangel, you got Psylocke, and characters who are less moral. And so they tend to get into much more of the violent story arcs. And again, Esad Ribic does art on that one. And of course, the great writing of Rick Remender.
Yeah. So what do you know about the whole X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue? It's when the teams kind of divided up somehow.
They've done that a few times, yeah. They've done it a few times. And I know most recently, you're right, yeah, there was a gold, there was a red, there was a blue. I've read a bunch of gold, I've read all of the red, and I didn't read any of the blue. It's basically a chance to give fans of different characters a chance to read the one they want, and they can skip the other ones, right? I thought red was really good. That was the Tom Taylor written story. And so people that like Tom Taylor's Nightwing might really enjoy I think it's 2 or 3 trade paperbacks that he did of X-Men Red. I thought Gold was pretty good, but it was really more of a soap opera. It was a lot of like, the wedding did happen in that storyline with Kitty and Colossus, but then later it became Gambit and Rogue. At the same, that was sort of X-Men's response to the Bat wedding, which was hilarious because both weddings didn't go off the way people thought they would. So I can appreciate what they did. I will also say that those all got snuffed before they were able to finish what they were doing.
Yeah, just showing
off because Hickman said, "I want to do X-Men." So they shut down all of those books to just say, we're going to reboot it all.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shame.
So, one thing I did want to make sure we talked about was, what are your opinion of essential arcs of X-Men? You know, where if you take away this storyline, the X-Men itself are not the same, you know, kind of a thing. For those of people out there, like I said, you know, I mentioned a list of where you could start reading earlier, and essentially, like people like me who I can't buy who knows how many X-Men books, like there are 900 Spider-Man books, but I can buy 20 X-Men keys,
right?
And they're part, and they would be a part of the essential. I mean, we'll talk about keys in a second, but with essential story arcs, like I would say, I don't know. I hate to go back to a story I don't really know much about, but I would say Days of Future Past, kind of a thing, especially since they made a movie out of it. That's got to be to me, as a non-collector, that's my brain saying there's got to be something about these two books that makes them important.
And it's amazing that those single 2 issues could be so impactful to the entire saga of X-Men, because it really just shaped them in a totally different light as being a part of a really tragic future potentially. And it introduced some kind of cool characters and highlighted some cool things. And I would say part and parcel with those 2 books is God Loves, Man Kills, which is one of it's one of the Marvel graphic novels. So it's a large format, square bound book. And they had, by the way, several printings of the book. They all look identical unless you check on the inside to read which printing it is. So you, for fans looking to collect only the first print, I think they did up to like 6 or 7 prints. Make sure you open and check it to make sure, or that it says on the slab if you buy the slab. But this is Claremont writing and Brent Anderson on the story and color and art. Sorry. But I think it's the same concept. You have, instead of the future and looking at, if Days of Future Past was the Days of Future Past movie, then God Loves, Man Kills is X2, X-Men United. It's this concept of the government deciding to step forward and put mutants on a list and register. You have to register. And what do the mutants do to respond to that? So, Nightcrawler plays a big part in both X2, but he also does in this book. And I think if you put those 3 books together, Days of Future Past 1 and 2.
Yeah, God Love, Man Kills, and like he kills the internet.
I'm seriously frustrated with this thing. I don't understand. It's been the last month. I don't know what's going on with my internet. I feel like I need to reboot the whole thing. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, well, at least it's not during Comic Gories.
I mean, right?
But but they're just, like I said, I don't know much about it based on other than the movies, kind of sort of the TV show, and so I can kind of piece together what I would imagine is important, because if they didn't make something focused directly on it, it wouldn't be as important. It's kind of like the whole, well, it's movies, it's money, it's kind of thing like that. So it's you go where the money is, kind of a thing. So okay, Age of Apocalypse, Days of Future Past.
I will say, so I will definitely say avoid Age of Apocalypse. And it's not because I don't like it. I have the whole thing in collected editions. It's because it's easily the most complicated and super 90s read of any X-Men books. So if the big crazy hair, wild costumes, bright colors, foil bumpy covers and stuff, if that's not for you, don't read that book.
Yeah, dense in 90s. Yeah, I can't. I listened to a podcast, the entire Clone Saga of the 90s for Spider-Man. I've listened to the reviews of the entire Dan Slott of ASM, and I can't tell you at the end of which one I was banging my head against the wall harder. I loved.
As much as I loved the story, I think it also demands that you know a lot about the X-Men before you go in. It does not slow down for you at all.
So from that very regard, you would recommend, I'd easily recommend Days of Future Past because it's 2 single issues.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the beauty of it. It's just 2 versus like 5 collected volumes of Age of Apocalypse. It's like a ton of different books, a ton of different artists and writers, and it's a lot.
So, hey, hon. So, but, so before we divulge into anything else, what would you recommend be for the collector out there looking to collect or get into X-Men keys? That are keys or books to get and all that. You know, like I have listed I have a few that I'm on my list and all that I'll fill in there. But as an X-Men collector, what would you recommend people get as maybe not a particular value, but just symbolic or important or something like that?
Obviously, like anything in the early Claremont era is valuable. Anything in that early run from, Days of Future Past all the way back to when he started on issue 94, it's all valuable, which is why all of it is going up. I think issue 101 is incredibly valuable just because of the creation of Phoenix and the importance of that. But issue 102 is a way better read. You should totally read issue 102. It's just a really good book.
But yeah, I understand 101 and 102. I've looked into buying. I've looked at 101 several times, and every single time the price is just like, I don't want to touch it right now. I don't want to touch it right now. So it is one of those books that people want, and the price reflects it. So, but
it's incredibly expensive for reads from Claremont are really valuable for those reasons, and they're not cheap.
Yeah. So but what I would recommend, for the key recommendations or whatever I'd call this segment. Obviously, if you want issues, I would obviously these are the more expensive ones are X-Men 1, Giant Size X-Men number 1, Uncanny X-Men 94, X-Men 101. Those are the ones I listed for ones I would want if money was no issue. I also I threw in X-Men number 12 here, first appearance and origin of Juggernaut, because I love the Juggernaut from the Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut in the ASM storyline, so I had to throw that in there as an ASM tie over. But then I would recommend, and I would get. These are the books I'm going to get eventually. Want to get eventually. X-Men 35 with Spider-Man on the cover. X-Men 50 was the first time it has a new logo, and just because I think the cover looks cool. I want the X-Men 123, partly because I want to see that. That's just for that. It's a key there. I think, and also just that whole Storm nipple thing. I just kind of want to see the inside of the book. Storm is a sexy lady. What can I say? 129, first Kitty Pryde, Emma Frost. 133, first Wolverine solo cover. 141, 142, Days of Future Past, I believe. 164, Binary, because I like the female Captain Marvel. There's something about that Binary cover is just really, really cool. I mentioned 168, that Kitty Pryde cover. There's a cover by JRJR in 207 that I wanted to get. 212, I think actually I have that maybe already. Oh, I have that, but I recommend people get it. That first Wolverine Sabretooth fight, because that's kind of like Lex Luthor, Superman, and
it's hard to judge. I know that Wolverine issue is like chronologically it's their first fight, but it's not the first issue where they fight, so it's hard to determine what came first.
Well, I would still recommend it because it's a pretty cool looking cover.
It's a great book.
And also the last two books I had on here was 221, the first appearance of Mr. Sinister, because I got the first Jubilee. I want the first Sinister, especially since the first Sinister is being very sinister-y in the recent X-Men books here. And the last one I have is the first cover appearance of Gambit, and I will say it that way and not argue whether it's first appearance or not. Because I have the Fantastic Four Annual 14, which a lot of people do argue is Gambit's first appearance, appearance and all that. So, like I said, if I had a choice between the two, I'd almost get the first cover appearance because I like first cover appearances. But I want that in the book anyway, eventually. But so I'm not going to say first appearance of Gambit. I'll just say first cover of Gambit.
And I will say it's a more egregious oversight than Hulk 180 and 181 because
the way I defined that. I almost came up with my own criteria, for first cameo, first appearance, a cameo appearance, first appearance and first full appearance. You know, you can say X-Men Annual number 14 is his first appearance, but then the first full appearance is from the beginning of the book, kind of sort of thing. You know, so if he appeared in Annual number 14, 75% of the way through before you have those 14 panels, then I would say that's his first appearance, but not his first full appearance where he was all the way through the book as a character. You know, like after 267 on, where Gambit exists as a character, period. So, I mean, maybe it's a way of me making logic fit or making my own system so that way I can just have my cake and eat it too.
I mean, get them both, right? Just get them both.
Yes. But I came across the first appearance of Gambit in the Fantastic Four Annual 14 when I got it for like $60 or whatever. So I'm like, I couldn't pass up that book, you know, just so I can say, hey. And I have to admit that just having the book, actually having and owning the book, went a long way in convincing me in which book was his first appearance. You know,
how did this bad? Okay, sorry. So you were we were talking about books to collect, and I do have one that you haven't mentioned.
Yes. But anyway, while you're finding it, this is another reason why I'm in favor of a Magneto in a white suit. Because seriously,
ooh,
how badass does he look?
That's a great cover. Is that Del Mundo? Who's that?
Marco
Cicchetto.
Yeah, this is English. This is English, and I do speak it.
Well, he's the guy that's doing the Daredevil run with Zdarsky of late.
Yeah, this is the X-Men 1 Young Guns cover. So awesome. I had to have this. I had to have this one just because. But that is why Exhibit A for why Magneto deserves to be in white.
So, as far as like collectible issues and stories that I like, I want to get into like a little Wolverine pack I got going here.
Bring him on. He's my favorite X-Men.
Obviously, the Frank Miller run is a classic 4-issue miniseries that you should definitely read for fun, but also it's quite collectible because
4-issue miniseries. Yeah, I have that second volume. It was cool. That Patch Adams, or the Patch one and Hulk one behind your left shoulder is cool, and all that.
That's the ongoing series, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the movies, but Logan was obviously based on some of the Old Man Logan, which is definitely worth the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a Barry Windsor Smith fan, the Weapon X miniseries in Marvel Comics Presents, sorry. Really, really great miniseries. And then, lastly, I want to mention this young lady. I'm a Laura Kinney fan. I think she's actually maybe a better Wolverine than Logan in a lot of ways. She's certainly more well-rounded as a character in a lot of ways. So her first appearance, obviously great, but for me, it's all about the all-new Wolverine storyline that Tom Taylor did.
I have the first issue of that one of her.
It's a really fun read. It's only 35 issues. You can buy an omnibus and read the whole thing if you want. If you're a Tom Taylor fan, read it. It's great.
Nice. Well, those are some definitely good books. You know, I mentioned bigger keys and some bigger things and all that. You mentioned more common stuff, which is, I guess, a good thing. Which is the reason why I brought you on. Is the X-Men guy to bring some X-Men stuff that everyone can like, not just keys. So definitely good. So that's why I brought you on.
I do what I do.
All right, but thank you very much for joining me, John. I do appreciate it. This has been a fun experience just talking X-Men. Hopefully people learned a few things from the two of us, and I just didn't take up half the time talking about stuff everyone knows because they saw it in the movie. So, but definitely a lot of fun here. So, do you have anything you'd like to add before the internet quits out on us again? And we have to.
I'm sorry for the bad internet. I appreciate the time to talk more X-Men. You know me; I'm always down for mutant shenanigans. I appreciate you taking the time and letting me show you some stuff.
Yes, I do. A lot of fun, and who knows if you have another character and we can talk about and all that in the future and all that. You're last time I had you just on a one-on-one chat, my video went viral. So here's hoping. So, so I'll definitely have to. I'll pass the link on to you, and you can or pass the link of our chat with the podcast over to you, and you can spam all your X-Men groups. Sub up to the podcast. You know, make Comic Collectors Corner, you know, large and in charge. So
I love it.
So all right. So take care, John. Thank you again for coming. And as I always like to say at the end of my regular videos, happy collecting, everyone. Till next time. Talk to you later.